Well now, sigh, funny thing, how a smell can pull you clean back in time. Just this morning, I was sitting out there on the porch, mug o' black coffee in my hands, like I done near every day since I retired the OL farm, and wouldn't you know it, that early June air, with the honeysuckle blooming and the damp earth smelling, rich from last night's rain. Well, it got me thinking, like one o' them old wind-up record players starting up in my head. And there I was again, not here in this OL creaking chair, but back on the farm, 30, 40 years ago. Young and strong and full o' grit, and always working. Say yeah, that's what got me started this morning. See, some memories, they visit you, Gino, like an old friend passing through town. And others, well, they settle in heavy on your chest, won't let you be. This here's one o' them kind. There's something I've been carrying around all these years, a thing I'd done wrong, or maybe just done foolishly. Folks might call it regret. I reckon that's as good a word as any. And I figure, well, maybe it's time to let it out. You know, back in them younger days, when the kids was small and the farm was busy, all I could think about was work. Getting that next field turned, fixin' that busted tractor, balin' hay for the rain came. Always a list, longer in my arm. Thought that was what a man was supposed to do. Keep food on the table, roof over the heads. And Lord knows I tried. But, sigh, sometimes I wonder if I was trying too hard at the wrong things. In this here story, it ain't just fair me. No, sir. I figure if you're sitting there listening, maybe you're young, maybe you got a family of your own, or maybe you just wondering what matters most down the line. Well, maybe my words will help you see a thing or two I didn't see soon enough. Oh, and while you're here listening, if you don't mind, maybe drop a little OL, like or leave me a comment down below. Kinda nice knowing these words ain't drifting off into the wind. And if you feel like hearing more sometime, well, you can always subscribe. No pressure now, but it sure does help this OL fella keep talking. Now where was I? Oh yeah, what is it that won't let me sleep some nights? What's this heavy thing sitting in my chest after all these years? Well, it's this. I reckon I spent too much of my life out there in them fields, and not near enough sitting at the supper table with my family. There it is. Plain and simple. And let me tell ya, simple don't mean easy. A man can wake up one day, gray in the beard and stiff in the knees, and realize his baby's done growed up while he was chasing the next paycheck or fixing the next fence post. And the sweet gal he married, well, maybe she was waiting on that porch more nights than he cared to count. Long pause. So that's what's been rattling round in my head this morning, with that honeysuckle smell in the air. That's why I figured I'd sit down here and talk a spell. Reckon some things, if you don't speak, they weigh even heavier. And maybe, just maybe, somebody out there listening won't walk the same path I did. Back when I was just a youngin', living out there in Kansas, life moved at a different pace. The sun rose slow and steady over the fields, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and orange, and folks around us had simple ways, good honest working hands, and hearts full of kindness. We didn't have much, but what we did have was enough. I remember the dirt roads that led to our little farmhouse, the smell of fresh turned earth after a rain, and the sound of my ma calling us in for supper as the fireflies started dancing in the twilight. Those days, I believed that kindness was the truest currency there was, that if you gave a hand, it'd be returned when you needed it most. I believed people always came back to what mattered, family, love, and the land beneath your feet. I was just a boy then, with wide eyes and a head full of dreams. Not the kind that made you rich or famous, but the kind that filled your soul with quiet hope. I dreamed of running through those fields until I couldn't run no more, of sitting on that porch watching the stars come out and feeling the world was right. My pa taught me the value of hard work, but he also taught me to listen, not just to words, but to the silence between 'em. Those lessons stuck with me deeper than any plow ever could. I was shy with the girls, sure, but I had a heart that beat loud when I saw my ma's gentle smile or the way the creek near our place sang a lullaby at night. I thought life was simple then, and in many ways it was. But simple don't mean easy. Life's got its own way of teaching lessons when you least expect it. As I grew older, those dreams started taking shape, not the wild kind, but the steady, patient kind. I got married to a sweet gal who smelled like honeysuckle and sunshine. We made a life together, built that farmhouse brick by brick, day by day. And I swore to myself I'd always put family first, no matter how hard the work got. But, well, sometimes a man's good intentions get tangled up in the day-to-day grind before he knows it. Back then, I thought if I just worked harder, the worries would fade and the future would be safe. I was wrong. The rhythm of the farm was like a heartbeat. Early mornings and late nights, seasons turning like clockwork, and the steady hum of tractors in the fields. I remember the smell of fresh hay in the summer, and how the children's laughter would echo from the barnyard as they chased fireflies on warm evenings. Traditions were everything to us. Sunday dinners with the whole kinfolk gathered round the table, stories told by the fire, and prayers whispered before sleep. Those moments, small as they were, stitched the fabric of my world. I was a young man filled with hope, believing that the good in people in the land would carry me through. I can still see my pa's weathered hands holding mine, teaching me to plant seeds not just in the soil but in life itself, seeds of patience, kindness, and respect. Those lessons shaped who I was. I was a boy who believed in the promise of tomorrow, who trusted that no matter the storms, the sun would shine again. And through it all, I held close the hope that I'd be the kind of man my family could be proud of. Looking back now, those days seem like a sweet melody playing softly in the distance, the kind of tune you want to hum long after it's gone. And I reckon that's why this story keeps coming back to me, because no matter how many years pass, the child I was then still lives inside. The boy who believed that kindness was the heart of the world, and that folks always found their way back home. I remember the day it all changed like it was yesterday, even though it's been many years. We were in the middle of a hot Kansas summer, sun beating down on the fields, sweat running like a river off my brow. I was just getting used to the rhythm of life on the farm, thinking I had it all figured out. Then she showed up, a new face in our small town, like a fresh breeze rolling in when you least expected. Her name was Mary, and she had eyes that caught the light like morning dew on the wheat. I can still see her Logan, under that wide-brimmed hat, the way her voice was soft but sure, and how the whole world seemed to shift just a little when she walked by. I didn't know it then, but Mary was the kind of person who'd turn your whole life upside down. I was a quiet boy, more comfortable with a plow than with words, but something about her stirred something deep inside me. The first time our hands brushed while passing by the church on a Sunday, my heart kicked into a running race I couldn't slow down. I couldn't explain it, why it felt like the sun got brighter or the air got sweeter, but I knew right then that life was about to get a whole lot more complicated and a whole lot more beautiful all at once. She came from a family that didn't have much more than we did, but her spirit was bigger than any OL born on the farm. Mary had this way of looking at the world, full of hope and fire and a little bit of mischief. Folks around town started talking, of course, about how she and I seemed to be drawn together like two pieces of a puzzle. But I was scared too, scared of what it all meant, scared of losing myself in something I didn't understand. Still, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, this was what I'd been waiting for all along. Then came the letter. It wasn't much, just a few lines scribbled on plain paper, but it hit me harder than a summer storm. Mary's pa had gotten sick, real bad, and she had to move away for a spell, far from the little town we both called home. I read that letter over and over, my hands trembling, heartache sitting heavy in my chest. I couldn't wrap my mind around it, how someone so full of light could be taken away so suddenly. That was the moment I realized life ain't always fair, and sometimes you don't get a say in the hardest things that come your way. I'll never forget sitting on that porch swing, watching the sun dip low behind the cornfields, feeling like the whole world had tilted just a bit off its axis. I was young, sure, but that day felt like the first time I truly understood what it meant to want something so bad and not be able to reach out and hold it close. My heart was pounding, and I didn't know why exactly. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was hope, or maybe it was a little bit of both tangled up together. Mary's brief time in my life taught me things I wouldn't come to realize until much later. She showed me that even in the quietest corners of the world, there's a storm of feelings just waiting to break loose. She was the first real jolt that made me think about what I wanted from life beyond just working the fields and making sure the farm kept running. I didn't have the words then, but I had a feeling, a knowing, that there was more to this journey than just sunrises and plowshares. I reckon that moment, that meeting with Mary, was like a spark in a dry field. It didn't set everything on fire right away, but it lit a flame that never quite went out. I carried it with me through long days and longer nights, through sweat and struggle and quiet prayers. And while the years took us down different roads, that day stayed with me, tucked away like a secret in my heart. Looking back now, I see how important it was. That surprise, that quick flash of something new, because it opened a door. And even though I didn't walk through it then, I came to understand later what it meant to really live, to really love, and to reckon with the choices a man makes along the way. That day, that summer, changed everything for me. Life has a way of throwing curveballs just when you think you're getting a hold of things. After Mary left, things didn't settle like I thought they might. The farm kept buzzing and humming with chores and duties, but inside, I was tangled up in a storm I couldn't quite name. The folks around town, well, they meant well, but some had their own ideas about how a man should act, keep his troubles under his hat, never show weakness. So when the whispers started about Mary's family struggle and my quiet worry, I kept my mouth shut, like that was the right thing to do. But it wasn't. Not really. I was caught between the weight of what I felt and the way the world expected me to carry myself. Some days, I'd wake up feeling like the whole sky was pressing down on me, heavy and gray. I was angry sometimes, angry at the sickness that took Mary away, angry at myself for not being able to do more, and angry at how lonely a man could feel even surrounded by familiar faces. But I didn't say none of that out loud. Fear kept me quiet. Fear of seeming weak, of letting folks down, or worse, of admitting I didn't have all the answers. There were moments, sure, when my pa or a neighbor would try to lend a hand or a kind word, but the silence I kept was thick, like a wall growing higher between me and everyone else. My ma, bless her soul, would look at me with those tired eyes and wondering heart, but even she didn't know how to reach in and pull me out of the dark. I reckon that's when the real fight started, not with plows or fences, but inside my own head and heart. It's funny how the hardest battles are the ones you wage alone. I started questioning everything. Was I a good man? Was I doing right by my family? The shame of not being able to fix what was breaking gnawed at me like a rat in the barn. I'd sit on that porch at night, looking up at the stars, trying to make sense of it all. And sometimes, all I could feel was lost and scared. That's when the dilemma took root, the one that would follow me for years. I wanted to be the strong rock for my family, but the harder I tried, the more I felt like I was drifting away from him. The farm demanded my time and sweat, but my heart screamed to be home, to hold my wife and kids close, to not miss another moment. It was a tug of war inside me, and there wasn't an easy answer. The world outside didn't wait for me to figure it out. Seasons changed, crops needed tending, bills piled up. There was no pause button, no chance to catch my breath. And so I kept pushing forward, burying the hurt and the fear deep down, telling myself it was all for the best. But deep down, I knew that by choosing the farm over my family, I was paying a price I hadn't yet fully understood. Looking back, I see now how those early struggles shaped the man I became, stubborn, tired, carrying regrets heavier than any sack of grain. But at the time, all I knew was that life wasn't simple, and sometimes doing the right thing felt like the hardest thing of all. I remember that day clear as if it was painted fresh in my mind. The kind of day where time seems to stop and the world holds its breath, waiting to see what comes next. It was late afternoon, sun hanging low and heavy over the fields, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the earth. I was out in the barnyard, just finishing up some work, when the call came. That call that changes everything. My wife, my dear heart, was gone. Just like that. No warning, no chance to say goodbye. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, feeling like the ground had slipped out from under me. The sounds of the farm, the crow and rooster, the rustle of the corn, the hum of the tractor, all faded into a distant whisper. It was like the world had turned quiet, the clocks stopped ticking, and all that was left was the heaviness in my chest. My mind couldn't wrap itself around the words I'd just heard. How could she be gone? The woman who'd been my rock, my laughter, my reason to keep going. For a long moment, I just stood there, breath catching in my throat, heart pounding so loud I thought it might burst right out of my chest. I felt frozen, like a tree in a cold winter, rooted but lifeless. The pain was sharp and raw, a deep, aching sorrow I'd never known before. I wanted to scream, to shout to the heavens, to bring her back just one more time, but all that came out was silence. Losing her wasn't just losing my partner, it was losing the part of me that made this life worth living. All those years of work, the early mornings and late nights, suddenly seemed empty without her smile to come home to. I realized then, in that shattering moment, just how much time I'd spent chasing the farm and the fields, and how little I'd truly been present for the people I loved most. I remember thinking, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a deep shade of indigo, that if I'd only slowed down, if I'd only put down the tools and spent more time with her, maybe things could have been different. Maybe I'd have had the chance to say I love you one more time, to hold her hand through the hard nights, to laugh with her in the quiet mornings. But those chances had slipped through my fingers like the dirt beneath the plow. That day changed me. It broke something inside, but it also woke me up. I saw with painful clarity the cost of a life spent running after work and forgetting the heart. The grief was a heavy cloak I had to wear, but it taught me what really mattered. It showed me that no amount of harvests or paychecks could ever replace the warmth of a family gathered round the table, the touch of a hand, the sound of a laugh. In the silence that followed, I made a promise to myself to never let time slip away again without holding close those I love. That promise carried me through the dark days, through the loneliness and the sorrow, and though the ache never fully left, it became a part of me, a reminder, a lesson, and a reason to live a little better each day. I'll never forget how that moment felt, like the whole world stopped turning and I was left standing alone in the stillness. But from that stillness, I found a new kind of strength. A strength born not from the land or the labor, but from the heart and the memories that live on. It was quiet after the storm, quieter than I ever thought it could be. The house felt emptier than the fields after harvest, and every corner held a shadow that whispered of what used to be. Days blurred together in a kind of slow, heavy fog where time lost its meaning. I'd sit on that same porch, the one we built together, and stare out over the land that felt both familiar and strange. The sun still rose and set, the seasons kept their steady turn, but the world I knew had shifted beneath my feet, leaving me groping at pieces of a life that felt gone. I reckon that's what loss does. It hollows you out, leaves you with an ache that no amount of hard work can fill. The farm, once a place of pride and purpose, felt more like a reminder of what I'd lost. I'd walk through the fields, the dirt beneath my boots soft but unyielding, and wonder how to keep going when the one who made it all worthwhile wasn't there beside me. The chores didn't care about my heartache, the crops still needed tended in, the fences had to be mended, but it all felt like a shadow play, a routine I went through without really living. In those days, I found myself questioning more than just the loss. I questioned my faith in the world, in the kindness I once believed in so fiercely. How could such pain come to a man who tried to do right by his family? I wrestled with a loneliness that wasn't just about being alone. It was about feeling disconnected from the life I'd thought was certain. My heart felt heavy, and the hope that once carried me like the wind through the wheat seemed distant, like a flicker of light behind thick clouds. I wasn't the same man who'd stood on that porch years before, full of dreams and quiet confidence. Something inside had shifted, like the ground after a hard rain. I carried a new kind of silence, one that wasn't peaceful, but filled with questions that had no easy answers. Sometimes I'd catch myself reaching for the phone to call her, only to remember she wasn't there. Those moments stung sharp, reminding me that life had moved on without her, and I had to find a way to move on too, even if my heart wasn't ready. Friends and neighbors tried their best to reach me, to offer words or company, but grief is a lonely road, and I often found myself turning inward. I wanted to believe that time would heal, that the ache would soften, but there were nights when the silence pressed in so tight I thought I might suffocate. Yet, through that quiet pain, I began to understand something, that loss changes a man, but it doesn't have to define him. There's a way to carry the past with you, gentle and true, without letting it break you completely. I started to look at the world with different eyes, not bitter, but cautious, not hopeless, but thoughtful. My faith, once simple and sure, became more complicated, a quiet questioning and a slow acceptance that life holds both joy and sorrow, sometimes tangled together like the roots beneath an old oak tree. I learned to sit with the emptiness, to let it be part of me without letting it swallow me whole. What remained was a kind of quiet strength forged in the fires of loss, in the long nights of reckoning. I found comfort in small things, the warmth of the morning sun on my face, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the memory of her laughter carried on the wind. Those little pieces stitched me back together, slowly, one day at a time. I'm not the man I once was, and that's all right. I've carried pain that shaped me, but it's also taught me what truly matters. Life is fragile and fleeting, yes, but it's also full of moments worth holding on to, even when the shadows seem long. And in that understanding, I found a way to keep going, to keep living, even when the world felt cold and empty. Somewhere in the quiet that followed all that pain, a small thing happened, nothing grand or flashy, just a little flicker that stirred the dust on my tired heart. It was one of those mornings when the world seemed heavy and the days all ran together. But then, out of nowhere, my neighbor's boy showed up at the gate. Kid was no older than my own grandsons, eyes bright with curiosity, and he asked if I could help him fix an old tractor his pa had been struggling with. Now, I'm no mechanic, but I've been around machines all my life, and there's something about getting your hands dirty that pulls a man back to himself. So I grabbed my worn-out tools and we got to work, side by side in the warm Kansas sun. The kids' questions kept coming about the parts, the engine, the stubborn bolts, and for the first time in a long while, my mind wasn't clouded by loss or regret. I found myself talking more than just fixing. I shared stories of the old days, how things used to be, and what my pa taught me about never giving up. The boy listened like it was gold, and I reckon that made me feel a bit of that old spark stirring inside. That simple moment, working alongside someone who reminded me of what used to be, gave me a taste of hope I hadn't felt in years. It was like a door cracking open after being shut too long, letting in fresh air and light. I started thinking that maybe, just maybe, there was still room for new beginnings, even for a man who'd carried his share of sorrow. Helping the boy wasn't just about the tractor, it was about passing on something, hope, wisdom, a piece of myself that I feared lost. Around that time, I also began to take small steps towards mending old ties. I wrote letters I'd been too proud or too scared to send, reached out to family members I drifted from, and even found myself joining a local community group that helps folks in need. It wasn't easy. Some days, the weight of the past still pressed hard, but each little act felt like a brick laid down to rebuild a house I thought had crumbled. Through it all, a new sense of purpose started taking root. I realized that while I couldn't change the past or bring back what was lost, I could still shape the days ahead. There was power in kindness, in connection, in choosing to be present and involved. And that, I learned, was the heart of living well after loss. So here I am, still plugging away, with a cautious heart, but eyes open to the good that's still out there. It ain't always easy, and the memories still carry their weight, but there's a new song in my soul now, a song of resilience, of second chances, and of finding meaning in the simple moments. And if there's one thing I've come to believe, it's that it's never too late to start again, no matter how deep the night's been. I reckon there comes a time in every man's life when he's got to look in the mirror and face what's been haunting him, no matter how heavy or hard it is. For me, that time came slow, like the gentle setting of the sun after a long day. I carried my regrets close, like an old coat worn thin with use, but one day, I knew I had to shed that weight, or else it'd bury me for good. The past, with all its mistakes and losses, was there, sure as the hills around my farm, but it didn't have to define who I was anymore. That's the truth I finally found, sitting alone on that creaking porch, the air thick with the smell of pine and earth. I made a decision then, plain and simple. I was gonna live on, not as a man chained to his sorrows or trapped by his failings, but as someone who'd been through the fire and come out still standing. I chose to forgive myself, the young man who worked too hard and loved too little, the husband who didn't always show his heart. I chose to forgive the past, too, with all its pain and broken promises. I realized that holding on to bitterness only kept me from the peace I'd been seeking. That day, I did something symbolic. I took an old, worn-out photograph of my family, one I'd kept tucked away in a drawer for years, and I carried it out to the fire pit. I watched the flames lick at the edges, seeing the faces of my loved ones flicker and dance in the firelight before the picture turned to ash. It was like letting go of the pain that had held me captive. I wasn't burning memories. I was freeing myself from the chains they become. From that moment on, my life felt lighter. I started finding joy in the little things again, the sound of the wind through the trees, the smile of a neighbor, the laughter of my grandkids playing in the yard. I stopped waiting for some grand sign or moment to tell me it was okay to be happy. I gave myself permission to live, to love, and to move forward without the heavy burden of regret. I knew I couldn't change what was behind me, but I could choose what lay ahead. And that choice gave me strength I hadn't felt in years. I began reaching out to my family, making amends where I could, and simply being present in their lives. I learned that love isn't always loud or grand. Sometimes it's just showing up day after day with an open heart. So here I am, A man who's seen the darkness but chose to walk into the light. I won't pretend the scars are gone. They're a part of me, and they always will be. But I've made peace with that, and I carry those scars with pride, proof that I survived, that I grew, and that I kept on living. I chose to live without blame, without regrets, just forward, step by step. And if you're listening to this, I hope you'll find the courage to do the same. Life's too short to be spent holding on to things that weigh you down. Sometimes the bravest thing a man could do is to forgive himself and keep moving on. Well, after all these years of looking back and thinking about what was and what could have been, I've come to understand something real important, and it ain't the kind of advice you hear from a preacher or a book. No, it's a truth carved out of a lifetime of work, love, loss, and learning. You see, I once thought life was all about getting things done, making sure the crops were planted, the bills paid, the house fixed up tight. I thought that was what made a man good and his family proud. But now, well, I reckon it's different. What I've come to realize is this: life ain't really about the things you do or the stuff you accumulate. It's about the moments, the small, quiet ones that slip by when you're too busy chasing bigger dreams to notice. It's about sitting on the porch with the ones you love, Logan and nothing special, sharing stories that make no sense to anyone else but mean everything to you. It's about saying the words that matter before it's too late, and listening when others need to be heard. I learned that work's important, sure, but it shouldn't take the place of living. You can't plant a seed and never water it and expect it to grow strong. Same goes for family, for love, for yourself. You gotta tend to it every day, even when the sun don't shine right, even when the ground feels hard and cracked. And the truth is, sometimes you gotta let go of pride and fear and all the things that hold you back from being present. Because the time you have, well, it ain't as long as you think. Maybe that's the hardest lesson of all, realizing that the clock's ticking and you can't get back what you didn't give. But it ain't all sadness, not by a long shot. There's a kind of beauty in knowing that every day is a chance to make things right, to be kinder, to love deeper, to live truer. It's a chance to stop waiting for a sign or the right time and just start right now with what you've got, where you are. So, if you're listening to this and you've got people you love or dreams you set aside or moments you're missing, maybe it's time to stop waiting. Maybe it's time to put down that shovel, turn off the worries, and just be there. Be all there. Because those are the things that'll fill your heart at the end of the day, not the work done or the money made. I don't say this to preach, but to share what life showed me in its quiet, stubborn way. To remind you that it's never too late to change the path you're on, to mend what's broken, and to find peace with the road you're walking. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just gotta have the courage to keep trying, and the heart to hold on to what's real. And maybe, just maybe, if you listen close, you'll hear that old farmer's voice in the wind, telling you to cherish the moments, love without holding back, and live with no regrets, because that's the truest harvest a man can reap. Well now, here we are at the end of this little journey I've been sharing with you. I sure hope my words found a place in your heart, just like they've lived in mine all these years. You see, this story ain't just about the past, it's about the here and now, about how the choices we make today shape the memories we'll carry tomorrow. Life's a funny thing like that, always pulling us forward while holding onto the echoes of what's been. I want to ask you something, straight from this old heart of mine. What do you think? Do you believe that real love, the kind that roots deep in your soul, should always find its way back? Sometimes I reckon it's like a river, winding and turning, but always flowing toward the same place. Other times, I wonder if some loves are meant to be remembered like a sweet song you hum when the day gets quiet, not always there, but never truly gone. This story I've told, it's mine, sure, but I figure it belongs to anyone who's ever felt the ache of missing someone, the hope of a second chance, or the weight of regret for time lost. It's a gentle reminder that while the past shapes us, it doesn't have to bind us. There's a kind of freedom in that, a lightness that comes from accepting what wasn't choosing, what comes next. And sometimes, when the wind rustles through the corn and the stars light up the Kansas sky just right, I swear I hear her Logan soft and clear, like she's still sitting beside me on that porch, watching the world go by. Maybe it's just the way my mind holds on to her, or maybe, just maybe, she remembers too. So, as you go on with your own story, I hope you carry a little piece of this with you, a spark of courage to hold tight to the ones you love, to speak your heart before it's too late, and to find peace in the moments you have. And I leave you with this question to sit with, like a quiet friend. What part of your heart is waiting to come back home? Thank you kindly for sitting with me today. It means more than you know. Take care of yourself, and take care of each other. God bless.